Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Inside Winston Cup Racing, a familiar sight, the STP Pontiac number 43. Well, we're at the headquarters of that team, the Richard Petty Enterprises in Level Cross, North Carolina. Richard Petty is a big part of our show a little later on, but right now, let's check in on what happened at the Atlanta Motor Speedway and the Purolator 500 this afternoon with Randy Pemberton in our studios in Charlotte.
Thanks, Ned, and welcome, everyone, to the post-race edition of Inside Winston Cup Racing. Today at the Atlanta Motor Speedway, Ernie Irvan picked up his second straight Winston Cup win when he captured the Purolator 500. We'll have highlights of that coming up, and here's what else we have in this next half hour of Inside Winston Cup Racing. Richard Petty has been performing on and off the racetrack for nearly 35 years. While he is now retired as a driver, the King remains committed to putting the STP Pontiac back in victory lane with his new driver, Wally Dallenbach. Coming up, we'll have a conversation with the King about life on and off the racetrack.
Inside Winston Cup Racing is brought to you by cold-filtered Miller Genuine Draft and Miller Genuine Draft Light, taking the country by storm. Goodyear, #1 in tires. And by Haviland Formula 3 Motor Oil. Add more life to your car.
Although Winston Cup points leader Ernie Irvan picked up the victory today, rookie racer Jeff Burton stole the show after he led the field for a good portion of the Purolator 500 this afternoon. It wasn't such a good day for championship contenders Dale Earnhardt and Rusty Wallace, as both failed to have strong runs. Let's take a look at the highlights from today's Purolator 500.
Today's Winston Cup highlights are brought to you by Texaco Haviland Formula 3. Add more life to your car.
Loy Allen led the field of 42 drivers to the green flag for the Purolator 500, but he was quickly passed by outside pole sitter Jeff Bodine. Daytona 500 winner Sterling Marlin made contact on the green flag and suffered front end damage. He was forced to come into the pits and he would lose 3 laps. After an early race caution for this crash involving John Andretti, Ernie Irvan quickly shot past leader Terry Labonte as the race went green, with Mark Martin and Jeff Bodine battling for third. Meanwhile, both Chuck Bound and rookie Ward Burton suffered engine problems, while Rusty Wallace got a black flag for his right side window coming loose. 2 different pit stops to fix the problem put Rusty out of contention. 70 laps in, it was a great battle between Jeff Bodine and Ernie Irvan, but suddenly Bodine's Ford blew up. At the 100-lap mark, rookie Jeff Burton brought his Robestus Ford to the front. After regaining the lead, Ernie Irvan had trouble on his second round of green flag pit stops. The left rear tire was left loose, causing Ernie to come back on pit road. He would not lose a lap. By the halfway mark, there were only 6 cars left on the lead lap, and Jeff Burton was burying the field, holding as much as a 16-second lead over second place Mark Martin. On lap 207, the third yellow flag flew for Dale Jarrett and Brett Bodine. Dale Jarrett would retire for the day. Green flag on lap 214. Darrell Waltrip jumped out front, but Derek Cope brought out the 4th yellow flag with this wreck. Bill Elliott got a scare here as he picked up some debris from the accident. Another round of green flag pit stops with 50 laps to go saw Ernie Irvan come in. Then it was Burton and Waltrip and Morgan Shepherd, the only cars on the lead lap. Irvan came out of pit road with a full straightaway lead over Darrell Waltrip, who was running second and had come from his 40th starting position on the field. But a final caution flag for Bobby Hamilton's spin on lap 308. Everybody pitted, with Ernie Irvan coming out first once again. The final few laps saw Morgan Shepherd chase the current Winston Cup points leader, but to no avail. Ernie won his second straight Winston Cup race, with Waltrip, Jeff Burton, and Mark Martin rounding out the top 5. Goodyear Tires recorded their 4th win of the season today, but Hoosier tired cars definitely gave them a race. After the event, Bill Weber caught up with Ernie Irvan and some of the other solid finishers today.
Ernie, congratulations. You guys are going to be strong.
I tell you, it was a great win. You know, it was just, we pretty much had most of the cars covered all day, and then Larry goes, "You won't believe it. There's a bunch of purple cars coming," and that's all he had to say. And, man, the Hoosiers were tough, and, you know, they had a good tire, but at the end, the Goodyear definitely prevailed, and we had a great race team today, and did a good job on pit road, and you know, just everything went our way.
There at the end of the race, both cars were just about dead even, and I was trying a couple different little moves going in the corner. Sometime I'd lose a little bit, and then sometimes I would gain a little bit. If I could have got to his deck lid, I could have made him loose, but I couldn't get close enough to do that.
How about tires, Darrell? Did you make a statement today?
I think so. I think this is what it'll be like all year long. I think we never wanted an advantage. I never prayed for an advantage. I just prayed that there wouldn't be a disadvantage. And we were at a disadvantage for a couple of weeks, but this is what it's all about now. One brand against the other, nip and tuck.
To come down here as a rookie and run as well as we did, I think that shows the kind of team we got. Really had good pit stops all day, kept ourselves in position, didn't make any mistakes. That's the key to this kind of racing. If you make one mistake, you find yourself a lap down. And tires did a good job. Goodyear did a good job. We had really what you saw today is what the tire war needs to be, a battle. And that's if both tire companies do as well as the rest of the years they did today, I think it'll be great for Winston Cup Racing.
So Ernie Irvin makes the trip to victory lane for the second week in a row and continues to lead the Winston Cup point standings. Morgan Shepherd's always strong here at Atlanta. And how about Darrell Waltrip and Jeff Burton? They make strong statements about their tires and their teams. It's a week off next week, then it's on to Darlington. Randy, back to you.
Thanks, Bill. It was a great race today, and yesterday there was a great Busch race at the Atlanta Motor Speedway. The Busch Series ran the Busch Light 300. And Shauna Robinson became the first woman driver ever to start in the series from the pole position. But before a single lap was completed, a major wreck when Mike Wallace, Robinson, and Joe Nemechek went 3 wide in turn 3, eliminating the front row starters. Mark Martin appeared the car to beat as usual until he had an engine let go, leaving the field to battle Harry Gant. That wasn't much of a fight as Harry led 86 laps, including the final 42, en route to his first Busch Series win of 1994. The Busch Series stops next in Martinsville, Virginia for the running of the Miller Genuine Draft 500 next Sunday, while the Winston Cup Tour takes the week off before heading to Darlington in 2 weeks. We need to take a break. As we leave you, here's the finish order from the Purolator 500.
Some say that no man is bigger than his sport, but Richard Petty comes as close to it as anyone I know of, especially when it comes to the sport of auto racing. The man has done everything imaginable there. He has been the sport of NASCAR Winston Cup Racing, and that's why they call him the King. I'm proud to say that I raced against him in my career. It was during the early part of his career, and happy to say that I've been able to have a great association with him since then as I joined the media and he continued his racing career. Recently, Randy Pemberton had an opportunity to talk with Richard. Let's join that conversation.
Richard Petty is to the sport of Winston Cup Racing what names like Wilt Chamberlain and Joe Namath are to their respective games. And like those other superstars, Petty will be forever held in the highest of regard. His pioneering presence, winning tradition, and his popular appeal along with his STP logo, those indelible marks have made the King a living legend. It was at the closing of the 1992 season that Richard made his metamorphosis from driver to car owner. No longer would his faithful fans be able to forecast a 201st Winston Cup win. As a driver, Richard's last ride to victory came back in 1984 at the Pepsi 400 in Daytona, with then-President Ronald Reagan on hand and the King and Cale trading paint as they headed to the stripe. It's been 10 long years since victory, and Petty Enterprises has struggled for success. At Richmond last week, the STP Pontiac failed to take the green flag for only the 3rd time in 25 years. In our conversation a week prior, the King comments on his team, the cost of racing, and the competition just to qualify for a Winston Cup race.
You know, we got Wally Dallenbach driving this year, and we've sat down and looked at making a lot of changes, but I told Wally and Dale and Rodney and them, you know, when we work on the cars, let's find out what we've got and what kind of team have we got before we start making a bunch of major changes. You know, Wally's got to get used to us. We got to get used to him. And the car's not that good, but what's not good about the car? You know what I mean? Is it, you know, is it us? Is it Wally? Is it the handling? Is it tires? Is it the car? What is it? So we have to sort of keep working at pinpointing that deal before we just say, okay, we're going to throw everything we got away and start all over again, because we wouldn't know where to start there. So I think it's just a time element deal, but you got to figure that, you know, Petty Enterprise has not done a whole lot in the last 8 to 10 years. And so I feel responsible for a lot of it, but the people I've got a lot of confidence in. I mean, they've proven themselves to me that they know what they're doing. They make the changes, or they don't mind doing the work. They get along good. You know, I mean, all of those things are there. The big deal that's missing is something that keeps them from being consistently winners.
How do you make money racing? I mean, people, you know, the expense, it's so expensive to show up. I mean, I hear stuff anywhere from $50,000 to $130,000 a race, including everything that goes in, the employees, I mean, the whole 9 yards. How do you?
I don't look at it from race to race budget situation, because, you know, if you go to a race and you run the race and you don't tear the car up or you don't blow the engine up and you win the race, then that's one thing. You go to a racetrack and you tear up a couple of cars and wear out all your tires and blow up a couple of engines, then that's another thing. So it's hard to figure on to me, for a budget for a race to race. So I just say, okay, this is how much we've got to do the job in, and we start spending at the first of the year. Hope we got some left at the last of the year. You know, as far as making money at it, I don't know. The way I've done it, the way I've always done it from Richard Petty and Petty Enterprises standpoint, is that if I can keep Petty Enterprises on an even keel, in other words, as far as I don't have to pay the driver, or didn't have to pay the driver, didn't have to do a lot of the extra stuff that I do as a car owner now. I always made mine with outside endorsements and situations like that, doing outside stuff for STP, outside stuff for Pontiac or whoever we was working with. So that's the way Richard Petty made his living, not the monies that he made on the racetrack. When you got 40 or 44 cars or whatever they got that's sponsored that wants to run the full circuit, and they can't start but 40 cars, some of the short tracks, it's really going to get pushed and shovey for a lot of us. The idea is that the strong, it's just like nature is supposed to be. The strong survive and the weak sort of fall by the wayside, and basically that's the way the system is, and that's the way it ought to be, even though I don't want to go home either and nobody else does, but that's the way it'll have to be, and eventually you weed it out. Then you wind up having better races because you got the better teams and the better drivers and the better sponsored people are going to come and put on a better show.
Well, that competition certainly is getting tough now in NASCAR Winston Cup Racing, but it's always been tough. This team is working very hard to try to prevent themselves from missing any other races, and hard work is what helped get Richard Petty where he is today with 7 NASCAR Winston Cup championships. But Dale Earnhardt is closing in on him, and Richard Petty talks about that when we come back. So you stay with us.
Coming to TNN Motorsports, the Goodwrench 500, the Winston Select, the Budweiser 500, the Champion Spark Plug 500, the Slick 5300, the Splitfire Spark Plug 500, the AC Delco 500, the Slick 5500, Winston Cup 94, get ready.
We have now moved inside the Richard Petty Museum at Level Cross, North Carolina. Every race fan should come here if they get an opportunity. This place houses so many of the memories of Richard Petty's 200 victories and his 7 NASCAR Winston Cup championships. Now, I think his 200 victories is safe as far as that record's concerned. I don't think anyone will ever touch it. And a lot of people thought that his 7 Winston Cup championships was safe, but we all know that Dale Earnhardt is moving in now. He has 6, and Randy Pemberton talked to Richard about that.
For over a decade, the thought of any driver being able to duplicate the King's 7 Winston Cup titles seemed far-fetched. That is, until Dale Earnhardt sewed up his 6th title last year. Richard reflects on his and Earnhardt's careers, his new Busch Series team, his political promise, and his family, which he refuses to put off, even though racing remains a priority.
What do you think, Earnhardt? First of all, he's got a shot at tying you. He's got a few years left. He's got a shot at tying 7. Do you care if he ties
Well, you know, you got to look at it from my standpoint or from his standpoint or any standpoint. This is different timing.
Yep.
I did my thing in my time, and I did it against the very best that they could bring out there at that time. Okay, Earnhardt's doing it against the very best that they can bring out at this time. Now, when you start trying to compare Earnhardt's era with the David Pearson, Richard Petty era, or Bobby Allison era, or Cale Yarborough era, or Junior Johnson era as far as that's concerned, or when you go past Earnhardt and get into somebody else, whoever's going to be next that carries the thing around, there's no way you can compare because the situations are so much different. Equipment's different, racers are different, the people are different, circumstances are different. So it's hard to compare. The only thing you're comparing is numbers. You're not really comparing person for person or race for race or anything like that. And, you know, right now, you know, Earnhardt should be able to win 8 or 10 championships if you look at what he's been doing and the team he's got with Childress and all the way they've got their deal. But I guess that's what keeps us all coming back, that what is going to happen tomorrow or next week or next year, nobody knows. That's the reason all these people are coming down for this particular race. They don't know who's going to win. If they knew Earnhardt was going to win, a lot of them wouldn't come.
What made you start the Busch team?
Well, the Busch team was sort of a situation where Rodney Combs and myself have been in business for 3 or 4, 5 years with the Richard Petty driving experience. And Rodney had been trying to do something in Winston Cup or Busch for a long time. Last year he had a pretty good ride all year long, and then he decided that, you know, had some boys out of Pennsylvania, and, you know, the deal worked good, but he wanted to have more control of what was going on. And looks like it's going to be a real good team. You know, they've got the money to be able to get it cranked up. I don't know how long they can go with it, but they're going to have 4 brand new cars. Everything there is brand new. I've been able to help them with a lot of stuff from the Winston Cup cars and stuff and move stuff over, and so it should be a good workable situation.
What are you going to do government-wise? I mean, there's always been rumors, and I know you've entertained all kinds of thoughts about maybe running. I mean, you've been in office for quite some time, a county commissioner, but what are your aspirations?
Well, you know, I've been county commissioner now for 15 and a half years, and I decided not to run again for another term. But, you know, we started the Richard Petty political pack in North Carolina. You know, we try to get up a little money, try to help some what we think is deserving conservative candidates to go into office. You know, what I do later on, I mean, I don't know. Right now, I'm not running for anything in '94, except I'm trying to help some people and trying to lay some groundwork for some grassroots people so that maybe some of these days, if I did decide to do something, you'd already have some support there where if you went in, you might could get something done. Family's been good. I mean, you know, you got to look back at the last 4 or 5 years and all the stuff we've done. Our racing fortunes have not been that good, but our family fortunes have been super.
Nothing more important than that.
Nothing more important. That's what it's all about. When people forget their families, then I think that's probably the biggest trouble with the whole country today is that people get too involved in themselves and not involved in their families enough to be able to take care of themselves. And I think it shows a lot.
Well, certainly his love for his family has been well documented over the years, and it's been very obvious that it was there. And I don't think there's any doubt but what his love for his family and their support has helped him to get a lot of these checkered flags and these trophies, and we all look forward to the day that he'll get back in victory lane for the 201st time. Right now, we need to take a break. When we come back, we'll have the mailbox, so you stay with us.
Next Sunday on Inside Winston Cup Racing, we'll have the pre- and post-race reports from Martinsville, Virginia, as the Busch Series rolls in the Miller Genuine Draft 300.
We'll have a conversation with Kenny Wallace. He returns to the Busch Series in 1994, concentrating on chasing the championship and a future return to Winston Cup.
And we'll talk with veteran car owner Dick Moroso. He's back on the Busch Series with a full-time sponsor in FINA and a promising young driver, Randy LaJoie, behind the wheel.
The IWCR Mailbox is brought to you by Miller Genuine Draft.
Our question this week is from our voicemail box from Paul Bridges of Holland, Michigan.
They're always talking about tire compound, and I was wondering what the tire compound means and how does that affect the handling of the race car?
Since tires have been a big story this year, Paul, that's a good question, and for the answer, we'll go to Wayne Torrance, who's the assistant field manager for Goodyear.
Well, that's a good question, and thanks for calling in. The compound is actually the hardness or the softness of the rubber that's used in the tread of a tire. Generally speaking, softer compounds have a little more adhesion, but it also generates more heat, so you have to gauge it based on the track that you're running.
Questions for the voicemail box are recorded on the Finishing Positions hotline. Remember, for up-to-the-minute Winston Cup pole qualifying results, race results, and point standings, or to record your questions, call 1-900-73-RACES. Only 89 cents per minute, average call 2 minutes for mailbox, or 3 minutes for results. 1-900-73-RACES. Call now. If we use your question on the air, you'll receive this embroidered Miller Genuine Draft jacket.
Well, I'm afraid our time's up for today. Hope you enjoyed the show, and our thanks to the folks here at the Richard Petty Museum and also the folks at the STP race team for allowing us to come in here. You be sure to join us again here on TNN for more on Inside Winston Cup Racing.
Inside Winston Cup Racing has been brought to you by Cold-Filtered Miller Genuine Draft and Miller Genuine Draft Light, taking the country by storm. Goodyear, #1 in tires. And by Haviland Formula 3 Motor Oil. Add more life to your car. The official conversion van of Inside Winston Cup Racing is Gladiator from Glavelle, America's #1 luxury van. Glavelle, the way we put it together sets us apart.
Trucks and tractor power tonight on TNN.